am humbled by this victory.
On election night, Anthony Albanese declared his government would be driven by two principles. He vowed no one would be held back and no one would be left behind.
Because I want every parent to be able to tell their child, no matter where you live or where you come from, in Australia the doors of opportunity are open to us all.
The cost of living was a central feature of the campaign, with the first interest rate rise in years and a focus on wages, crucial in Labor's political messaging.
We're about to see the biggest wages cut in more than 20 years.
We know that people are really struggling.
The Prime Minister's economic credibility has been shredded.
But it's likely that not even the new government expected to be confronted by a new round of cost of living pressures so early into its time in office.
On interest rates, we know that this will be a blow for families. We know that people are suffering from a cost of living crisis, with everything going up except for their wages. Though we've been in government now for just a little bit over 2 weeks, these pressures have built up over 9 years.
In Tasmania, someone who may be feeling left behind just now is Angela Finch. The mother of 3 children lives on a single parent benefit in Hobart and has already been feeling the brunt of rising living costs.
So I'm a sole parent to 3 daughters that are 13, 9 and 4. We became a sole parent family in 2020 and I've been studying full-time and living on the parenting payment single since that time. A fortnight, it is about $1,800 and $900 of that is going on rent. $120 of that goes on electricity, and then we've got $50 on internet and phone and things as I do study from home. And then the rest of it is food, medical, school expenses, study expenses, medication, life.
Chances are that the 30% of Australians who, like Angela, are in the private rental market will also soon feel the impact of yesterday's interest rate hike as landlords push rents up to reflect rising interest bills. It's been a particularly savage constellation of price hikes in an economy and population that has got used to low inflation and interest rates over the past couple of decades.
The rise in inflation we're experiencing now has some similarities with the inflation shocks of the mid-1970s, which were triggered initially by sharp rises in oil prices. It would seem that central banks around the world, including our own Reserve Bank, have now in the last few months all of a sudden recognised that and are slamming on the brakes pretty quickly.
Australia's energy ministers have been meeting today to discuss how they might be able to deal with some of those price spikes. And there has been a lot of debate already about how governments can try to influence energy prices in the short to medium term. But whether it is energy prices or inflation and wage rates more broadly, the policy levers open to government are fairly limited, particularly given how many of the price shocks are coming from offshore.
There are some things that the federal and or state governments could potentially do to contain the rise in energy prices, either by direct intervention in markets or, as some state governments have done, provide relief to households to assist with, for example, electricity bills, as the Western Australian government did in its most recent budget.
The federal government has foreshadowed for some time that its first budget in October will contain cost of living assistance in the form of more childcare support and longer-term measures which it hopes will ease energy costs. But a broad coalition of interest groups, ranging from industry to conservation, farming and welfare lobbies, yesterday released a statement arguing the government should also be thinking about short-term financial support for the most vulnerable energy users, including low-income households. That is, people like Angela, who are on income support, or companies coming out of energy contracts and suddenly finding themselves exposed to spot market prices, or small businesses which cannot pass on their rising costs to customers.
It's almost a daily discussion that small businesses would be having with themselves as to whether or not to put the costs up. They have to compete with big businesses around the corner. They have to remain competitive with their own competitors in their sector. For the small business owner, it's almost been wave after wave of increased costs.
The price shocks this year have only refocused attention on the adequacy of income support measures for people like Angela and those living on other forms of government assistance. It was a lively debate during the height of the pandemic when payments were doubled to help those suddenly out of work, but then cut again subsequently. Labor had originally promised to review the $46 a day job seeker payment, but it abandoned that pledge ahead of the election as it made itself a small target. It's not just the adequacy of the basic benefit, though, that comes into focus among the current price pressures. The rate of rent assistance has also been unchanged for years.
I'm so extremely lucky with my landlord. I haven't been able to cover my rent. So I've got behind in that, but I actually spoke to him last week and came up with a payment plan for that. But the thought of losing the house is terrifying.
There's growing speculation and some pressure for the government to provide additional support to households for the energy price surge, possibly through a tax imposed on the windfall profits being gained by energy companies. Using the existing petroleum resource rent tax would be one way of doing this.
In this particular case, where companies, many of whom don't pay much by way of income tax and haven't paid much by way of petroleum resource rent tax, are going to be accruing very significant windfall profits from increases in energy prices, I think there is a case that's worthy of consideration for levying a temporary windfall profits tax.
Despite the shock of yesterday's larger-than-expected interest rate increase, the Reserve Bank Governor was yesterday predicting inflation coming back under control into the 2 to 3% range it targets next year after heading higher in coming months. It is, of course, only a forecast, but economist Saul Eslake explains what underpins it.
The basis for those expectations is that, first of all, the conflict in Ukraine will end at some point, and as a result, the impact that that conflict has had on food and energy prices will unwind. The second assumption behind it is that the supply chain difficulties, which have been the source of quite a lot of inflation, pressure around the world and in Australia, will gradually resolve themselves by this time next year, if not earlier. And there is a fair bit of evidence to support that.
But even if inflation does indeed come down again next year, the price surge will have left its mark on the economy, on households and on the political debate.
Yeah, I really didn't think it could get worse. I thought this is the most painful it was going to be a few months ago, and it's just getting more painful. Everything I'm working for my family security is not attainable to me anymore. A better future for me and my children is not attainable. Yeah, that's the weight of it. It just feels really heavy.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.